Oh, that's going to ruin it. Okay. Oh, that's the first time that's happened. Well, anyway, I had to readjust the capture frame for the show magazine. That was a technical issue. But yes, I think that we are here. We are live. We are boom. I hope you got the boom in the first place. If not, I'm just going to pause the video right there. But we are set to go. Welcome to Tokyo Tonight 2. My name is Hiko Simon, here every Sunday night at 10:40 p.m. Japan time. And good evening, good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Good to have all of you here in the comments. Good to see some familiar names. Always nice to see some not familiar names as well. Do love it when you guys do, guys and gals, say hello. So please make sure to do that. Got some really good topics tonight. Not a lot of topics, but I'm hoping I'll have some time to do some music at the end of the show, which I haven't gotten to do lately. So I do want to get through it, but at the same time, certainly lately I've been I think the topics are ones that are going to be interesting to talk about, so we'll see how we go. As always, if you would like to get my attention, or you'd like me to if you'd like to ask a question, or ask for a topic, or ask for my view on something, you can @mark me Hiko Simon. I will see it in orange flashing here in the comments beside me. Yes, super chats, I'll take them. I'll stop the bus for those, but you just have to @mark Hiko Simon in the comments, and I will see it and I will respond. Starting out, let's see who's in here. We've got Bull Burlett's Boy, boom. We've got Simon Ochanoma, good to see people in there early. We've got Steve from Berkeley, The Final Countdown. Europe, 1987, I think that song was from. Yes, good song. And James Kelly, hi. We've got Mr. Cordy Chep. Trolling, as usual. We've got Sergeant Bilko, good to see you. Got me all fired up by tweeting the word butter at me in all caps just before the show. Thought you'd make me angry. Not gonna work. Well, I'm a little bit angry, and we'll see. It's probably going to contribute to the topics. We've got I see we've got a coffee and a cookie set, so get ready for that. I don't want to know if there's any milk in that coffee, or if it's anyway. Yes, we won't go into that. We have crikey, that timed out there for a second. We also have Steve from Berkeley, who I think I said before, Steve from Berkeley. We've got the J-Vlog, salutations. We've got Andrea Moboy, good evening. I know it's always late, but good to have you here. We've got, who else? Miss Cordy Cheb, Quentin Rankin, good to see you. Yes, we definitely reversed the polarity, had some slight tech issues. Yeah, normally the screen capture, it goes full screen and it is all queued up. It works the same every week, and for some reason this week it's being shown in a window. I didn't know you could do that. By the way, I actually practiced recording a Fortnite stream the other day. I didn't broadcast it, I just recorded it. It was pretty good, actually. I came 5th in a solo match, which is pretty good. I might post that up. If I were to post, maybe I'd edit it, make it a little bit more, maybe make it around one of my tracks, for example. What if I made a song, 4 or 5 minutes, and I edited a Fortnite match with highlights into that? Would you guys watch that? Or would you find that interesting or not? I mean, honestly, I might just do it anyway, but that is a thought I'm bouncing around inside my head. Who else we got here in the comments? We've got Andrea Moboy watching the men's final on TV. I think this is for this tennis, is it, in Australia right now? So very good. We've got Tokyo 503. Good evening to you. Indeed, I've had a good weekend. I hope that you've had a good weekend. We're here in rainy season, still mid-Chocolate season, however. Chocolate colours here, you can tell I'm such a fan. Actually, I had the Chocolate Pocky for the first time the other day, and yes, I'm trying. I'm actually over my upper health checkup limit right now, not by a lot, but just an annoying amount. And so I've just been thinking, okay, just ease back, get back under into the safety zone. And they keep releasing new Chocolate treats every week. You go into some convenience stores, they've got a whole shelf of nothing but Chocolate, special limited editions, and of course I have to try them once. So I'm fighting that at the moment. But yes, indeed, it's been a good weekend in spite of rainy season, because Chocolate season is continuing. That's a digression, isn't it? We've got Lauren Sakai, good to see you, welcome. Who else we've got in here? We've got, I think I've said hello to everybody. Let's go down. And yes, so don't forget, of course, watching the World Cup, Soccer World Cup as well at the moment. Yes, indeed, lots of interesting stuff going on. Well, look, let's get into the show. We do have some good topics, as I flagged in the title of the show. And one thing I've been considering, actually, is perhaps I should do more of the Philly D thing and actually make the topic. I try to always talk about, these are the topics that I will talk about in this show that I plan to focus on, and I've got some stories queued up talking about latest statistics that the birth rate is tanking, it's lower than ever. Some black company stories, some stories about working in Japan and what Japan's trying to do to address that. Black Mirror, I have to talk about Black Mirror, I love Black Mirror, and the high heel debate, which is actually kind of in a way like the top story right now, at least in terms of politics, which I'm all for. I'm a woke, enlightened, new age guy and all of that, but I have issues with the debate as well, which I want to raise. So we've got those four things, although I don't know, maybe I should just pick like the best one of these and make that the subject, just in terms of getting people interested in watching. But there again, I mean, it's a long stream anyway for people who don't know what it's about, so we'll see how that goes. But yes, let's go ahead. First thing that I've got on the agenda tonight, there is a high heel debate, that is correct. Just don't wear them if you don't like them. Well, that's Mr. Cordy Chap. We're going to get to that, but that is exactly... and thank you for the feedback, Lauren. I appreciate that. That is exactly the thing. There are some places with dress codes that require high heel shoes, and there is the debate as to people who are not comfortable wearing high-heeled shoes, whether you should force people to wear them, particularly when those dress codes are dictated largely by men. So yes, that's exactly what that subject is about. And if someone complains, throw heels at them, indeed. So yes, Sergeant Bilko, I admire your stand on principle, but who knows, maybe one day you'll have to do it. So we'll get into that, and we'll get into all the subjects that are flagged in the title. But first things first, Japan Business Time. I have gotten, hey, check out too. Good to see another super user actually, who's been supporting My Chan TV lately. I appreciate the comments and the feedback. In terms of My Chan TV, I've just been so swamped, and I've been meaning to give it a big push because I have to. We'll see what happens with that. It'll be one or the other. It'll either get a push over the top, or we'll have to figure out what to do with it. But yes, I do appreciate everyone who supports that, including also Lauren Sakai, and Tim the Asian Inc. And lately Tech Hard, I think, are my super users who give me the most feedback, and I really appreciate what all you guys do. But anyway, back into the subject at hand, Japan Business Time. So I'm co-presenting the next talk for Japan that Rochelle Kopp is doing regarding her book, Gaikokujin to no Hatarakikata, that she's written with Chomada-san from Microsoft. And although it's aimed at Japanese people with figuring out how to work in multinational companies and with foreigners. And yes, she's doing a general thing on working in multinational companies, and I'm going to be the guest speaker. I'm going to be the guest at the June 21st event that they're having, and we do a promo for that event. The thing is that it took me a while partly because of the sound issues, it took me a while to get around to editing the episodes for the next season. There are 8 of the episodes, but if I was to show those every week, obviously the promo for the that comes in episode 7 wouldn't happen until like 2 months after the actual event. So good news, maybe if you're into binge watching, me, is anyone into that? Maybe it's not going to work. Maybe this is going to be a disaster. But what I'm going to do is I'm going to post. I've just gotten approval for episodes 1 through 6. Now 7 and 8 are the ones with the sound issues, and I have actually, for the first time in many years, gone and made captions for those. And I've just gotten a big reminder what a pain it is to make captions. Basically 1 minute of video generally takes 10 minutes to caption, and that's just captioning, not translating. Although given that it's me talking, it's easy to translate myself. But it's hard, because the sound wasn't so great. I did have to caption episode 7, which is 3 minutes long, and I'm still captioning episode 8 right now, which is 8 minutes long. And that's a lot of work typing out the words that are being said, and it's kind of fiddly. I was using the YouTube's automatic captioning is better than it used to be, but it still isn't good enough, especially when you're dealing with a very bad audio track as I was doing. So we're doing that, but yes, indeed. The episodes are pretty much ready to go now. They just did get the approval from YouTube, so now it's just pretty much putting in the video information and putting them up. So what I will do is, with an aim to making sure you can watch the entire season before June 21, when this event with Rochelle is, which is like, geez, that's like 10 days away. Is that right? No, wait a minute. What's the date today? That is a good point. June 9. So I've got 8 episodes. So you know what? I'm going to have to put them up almost every day. Hell, I'll do that. Hell, it'll be good for views in the short term. There you go. Japan Business Time is starting probably tomorrow or day after tomorrow. I'm going to have to put them up to have them be there in time. In fact, actually, I really should start from tomorrow. Okay, and now you can see my awesome planning and creative process at work. Look out for Japan Business Time starting tomorrow. I'm going to start launching them live. Probably I'll do it around this time every night, just so that you people know it'll be in the morning for most of you. So you can wake up and look forward to a new awesome episode of Rochelle and I talking about startups and working in Japan. So look out for that. The Reiwa edition of Japan Business Time starting tomorrow, including the final 2 episodes. I apologize in advance. They have terrible sound. I did what I could to fix the indeed the probationary period. Sachigun, we've got your episode as well, so that is included in there. And yes, indeed, we'll be all set to go for in time for the event. So yes, and I did have to fix the sound on the last 2 episodes. They were terrible. It was basically I'm not kidding. It was like that. It was like Charlie Brown's Teacher. I did a pretty good job. You can hear most of it, but because I had to cut off all the hissing and all the stuff at the top end, you can't hear any S's. Like, even when I was trying to take down the captions, it was really hard to figure out myself what I was saying sometimes. But I put in bilingual captions and English and Japanese. I did English captions, Japanese captions, and both together, which actually comes out really cool. I wish YouTube would let you post bilingual captions by default, but I think I'll put them under UK English. If you look on UK English on episode 7, I'll put some notes there. You'll be able to see it that way. Anyway, so that's Japan Business Time. So starting tomorrow, it seems. This guy is not from this week. This guy's from last week, but what he's talking about is relates to the first story. The first story is that Japan's first oh, by the way, Andrew Morboy, just going back, Andrew Morboy thought I had mentioned the guy that married the hologram from the Asian Boss interview. I'm enjoying Asian Boss. I haven't watched that video yet, well, it's kind of connected to the first story, so let's get into that. The first story is that Japan's basically, in spite of having set fertility goals and whatnot, it is still continuing to drop. It's the government has a target of 1.8, so they don't even want everyone to have 2 kids. They don't even want to be replacing the population. They just want to be managing the decline so that it only falls to 100 million instead of like 70 million or 80 million. Yet Japan's birth rate is tanking. It is now down to 1.42 and getting lower and lower every year. And this is in spite of some efforts being made in recent years by the government to, genuinely make some efforts to improve working conditions in small ways. Trying to increase the number of daycares, trying to, address issues that are blockers to women participating in the economy. So things which you'd think perhaps being too small in scale or not ambitious enough. I've certainly been aimed at making things not so terrible for working women in Japan, and yet in spite of what's being done, the fertility rate in Japan is continuing to fall, and as it is, given that Japan, and this is another story I'm going to talk about a little bit later, it's funny, Abe has been defending the plans to increase the number of foreign workers in Japan, saying that it's not an immigration proposal. They're here as foreign labor. They're not going to be treated as residents. They're going to be, here on 5-year lots and sent away again. So even with the changing visa situation to deal with the labor shortages, it's kind of funny. And prefectural governors themselves have also been saying they want to increase the categories to allow foreign labor. They don't say that they want foreign residents. So ideally, what they're saying is, and this is the mindset of the government when it comes to immigration, is that they want foreigners to help fix the problem of there being insufficient people to work, but they don't want them to be residents. Which essentially is that, Abe himself is still committed to the primary idea of, increasing the population, which the LDP, of course, socially conservative, but moving with the times, full of lots of great ideas like this guy here, who, basically said that, well, obviously, baby making machines are broken. The women, they just need to be nagged to have 3 kids each, and that will fix the problem. And there we go. The result is, of course, that in spite of the best efforts of people like Mr. Sakurada, the birth rate is continuing to decline. And what I think is interesting about this, which I was tweeting a little bit just before the show, is that there are, I think there's 2 things that are really driving my perception, my feeling as a dude. There are 2 things that I think are really driving the birth rate down and down in Japan. The first thing is the obvious one, that it's not easy to have kids in Japan. I mean, it's not easy to have kids anywhere, of course, and how most developed countries are also having declining birth rates and whatnot. But I think Sachigun, no, we're not talking about generalizations like that, but we are dealing with a situation where, it's companies. Japan has been established on a framework after World War II where families had like 8 kids, on average, something like that. It was something ridiculous after World War II. And it was a matter of course that, mothers would have to stay at home. They would only work, if anything, when they were very young, and partly to find a husband at work, and then their job was looking after the homestead and the millions of kids that they were having, while the dad would work and the company would provide for the family through the father. And this is pretty much the whole post-war economic miracle structure that Japan is on, that these people from the LDP were a part of. And the idea is hostile towards the idea of allowing women to be able to work after being married or having kids, and as well as that, they were also, it was kind of a social contract, but the idea that the husband had to sacrifice everything in exchange for the social security that was given. Well, now the husband, the working men and women, neither of them have the same kind of lifetime employment social security that they had from employment before, yet companies are demanding the same kind of extreme loyalty. They're treating their workers just as sort of badly. And in terms of a society, I mean, it's increasingly expensive and difficult to be able to have kids, especially in a time when just to be able to rent an apartment, both parents often need to work, and companies are not flexible. They make it very difficult to accommodate 2 working parents and a kid. So for most people, so the first thing is that it's no question it's a difficult environment in Japan that's not conducive and does not encourage people to want to make the enormous sacrifice that comes with having kids. And that links to the second part. Why is it a sacrifice? Well, apart from the direct negatives and barriers and blockers and challenges to having kids in Japan, the second thing that makes it a sacrifice is the fact that if you don't have kids in Japan, if you're married, and even better if you're not married, Japan is, particularly Tokyo, which has a very low, Japan is a population growth rate based on immigration, but in terms of like fertility, Tokyo is like this. And the reason is, and I think this is also a problem for a lot of developing countries, Tokyo is awesome. I mean, Tokyo is an awesome place. If you are not stuck at home looking after kids. It's a city of 30 million people. If you've got hobbies, if you like shopping, you can shop for anything. If you like food, you can go to any type of restaurant. You've got entertainment, you've got opportunities to meet endless numbers of people. You've got great nightlife, all of these things that you have to give up. You've got fantastic living, single living. Most of the apartments in Japan are made for people to live self-contained lives where they can surround themselves with their hobbies and however they want to construct their lives. So it's incredibly friendly and fun, and it's probably the best city in the world. Tokyo, if nothing else, is probably, I would say, the best city in the world to be single and adult. And even being married without kids, you can still have a really, really good quality of life in Tokyo. But when you introduce a child into that equation, you have to give up on going out and having the hobbies, on the shopping, on the going out and enjoying nightlife and so on. All the things that make Tokyo awesome, that make that connect what people until they have kids equate with quality of life, they have to sacrifice. So my view is that if the government really wants to increase fertility, if they really want to have people feel incentivized to have kids, which right now I don't think anyone feels, I think they've got to radically shift the field. I think they actually have to go way beyond what they've been doing until now. So yes, it was partly distracted looking at the comments right now. I'm going to come back and basically I threw out some random ideas that just came to my head on Twitter just now. But I mean, things like, well, what about if the government is worried about the collapse of the economy based on the collapse of the population, then why not guarantee free education, true free education, no cost on education all the way through university, or free medical care for kids all the way through? What about giving parents, people who have kids, let them not pay income tax? Make it actually better to not have kids financially. Government pull all the levers. At the end of the day, it's an investment in having a working citizen that's going to be looking after elderly later on. So, give parents the financial means to make more of them. Make it mandatory for companies to have daycare for kids. Make it mandatory for companies to give 12 months paternity and maternity leave. And rather than put the burden of that on companies, put it on taxpayers. Pay full salary for people to have 12 months, childcare leave. I think if they really are serious about wanting to actually increase the fertility rate, you have to go a pretty long way to make it better, just to make people better off with kids than without kids in Japan. That's my thought on that. So looking at the comments here, and I see that Andrea Moboy has @marked me, and she said, what are the normal Japanese men's view of family and kids, etc. Hiko Simon. I don't know that I could speak for normal men. I'm here in the middle of the country any more than you could talk about what a normal man in Australia thinks about anything. But look, I think there are pervasive views, certainly around the people that I know. Certainly the views of women are that the idea of being married and the independence that you can give up, particularly if you're married to a traditional person, and particularly if they're the eldest son, and you're marrying into the expectation that you're not only going to have to look after the pampered eldest son, but also the parents of that person. I mean, that burden for one thing. Besides the fact that women, until they marry in Japan as single women, have relatively career-wise, economically, that they basically live the same lives as men, yet their lives become radically different when they marry. They're expected to carry all the extra burden of the child rearing, and kids often don't do anything like that. So in terms of how women think about family and kids, I think you do have people, of course it's biologically driven. People want to have these things, but I think it's a really difficult thing for a lot of women to sort of think about, to balance out the sacrifice that it involves. And a lot of people consciously decide that they don't want to make that sacrifice. With men, it's funny, I was in a situation in my 30s where I knew a lot of people from when I joined my Japanese company, and I'd go out drinking, I'd talk with these guys, and these guys would be often in relationships where they were beginning to have expectations of wanting to have kids and wanting to get married, and being and dealing with partners that didn't want to marry, and not specifically anything about them. They wanted to be in long-term relationships. These were probably in any other time period that would have turned into marriages, but I think it was more from the women's side, in most of the cases that I heard about, that they didn't want to commit. They were willing to they wanted to maintain separate apartments and sometimes live together, sometimes not, but they wanted to maintain their independence. So I think in terms of the average Japanese men that I know and that I've talked to, who have kind of, to the extent, it's a pretty small sample as well in recent years, but I think men are feeling like they can't do the things that they would expect, that most guys would still be expecting, to do what their dads did, to work hard and go up through the company hierarchy and have a steady relationship around their early 30s and plan to get married and have some kids before they get to the mid-30s. And they're drifting into the mid-30s with people who consistently don't want to get married. So on the one hand, you have a lot of people, I think, who, like women, enjoy the independence, but at the same time, I think men are being forced, partly by the fact that the situation is so unfavorable towards women, and they're being confronted with not being able to follow the lives that they were expecting to lead. That's what I see anyway. Mr. Kordychev has some funny ideas there. Sabotage Tokyo's awesomeness. That is actually something that a lot of people remember, that in Japan the parliament is mainly geographically elected. People in, I'm going to say something rude, so I'm trying to think of a polite way to describe it. Middle of nowhere town. It gets like up to 12 times the voting rights of people in Tokyo. So of course they say, move the capital out of Tokyo, make Tokyo suck. And I think there's actually some validity to that. But screw you guys. Break something that's nice just so that everything sucks. I mean, they literally want to make everywhere like the middle of bumfuck Japan, so that people have nothing better to do than make kids, like they do in Yankee towns. Are you kidding? I mean, yes, that's a solution, but surely we can do better. Lauren saying those are some radical ideas, but this is what I'm saying though. I think that the things that are working against fertility in Japan, the deck is so stacked against it. The combination of how bad it is, particularly for women, and how good it is also for women to not have kids, and men in general as well, and just the lifestyle that Tokyo offers. I think if the government really wants to influence that birth rate graph, if they really want to get that number to 1.8 or 2, I think giving a baby bonus and kodomo teate, a child rearing allowance of, what is it? It's like $60 a month that they give everybody with kids at the moment. Nobody's going to make babies in order to get a $60 a month allowance. So yeah, I think they need to go a little bit crazy with this sort of stuff. No, Sachi-kun, don't move to Tokyo because you'll never. Well, no, you won't necessarily never have kids, but you'll be so tempted by all of the fun and great lifestyle that it'll seem completely ridiculous, the idea of having kids. Now that said, there are people having kids, and there have been people continuing to have kids, and some of those people are not Japanese, and this is where, in spite of the government wanting to increase the number of foreigners but only as labourers and not as residents, we have awesome people like Abdul Hakim Sunny Brown, who is, unlike, in contrast to someone like Naomi Osaka, for example, born and raised in Japan. I mean, he is pretty much, obviously multicultural background. I think his mother is, in fact, actually father, I suppose, from the name, is from a Caribbean background, but he's fully Japanese, right? He's Japanese citizen, born and raised in Japan, culturally Japanese, everything else. He's currently attending university in the United States, basically for the athletics training facilities, but he's someone who's actually come up through the Japanese athletics system, and he just became the first Japanese person to break the 100 meters in 10 seconds. He actually has a rival. They've both been getting really close to 100 meters in 10 seconds, and Kiryu, Yoshida Kiryu is the other person. But it looks like Sunny Brown is the first one to have actually achieved it, although I think he had a tailwind at the time. Or in fact, was it official this time? But in any case, it's a New Japan record, so congratulations to him. And I think it's a great thing to see. I know that there's been some debate, and there's been some people like Brian McNeil, who I love what he does, and I saw some of his commentary talking about someone like Naomi Osaka and how there's limits to her acceptance in Japan, which I think is true, which he suggested was linked to her appearance, which I think is also probably true to an extent, but I think it's important to distinguish. Naomi Osaka, although is born as a legitimate Japanese citizen and was raised in Japan until she was 3 years old, and is by all rights legally and rightfully a Japanese citizen, culturally she's obviously not very Japanese. I mean, she's got a Japanese mum, she's a half, so she has elements of Japanese culture. She's not, definitively yes or no, but certainly she's been raised in America. She's been very close to her Haitian relatives, and been raised primarily influenced by American culture, obviously influenced by Japanese culture as well, but to a Japanese person, it's harder to see her as being Japanese like them, with a combination of all of those factors. Someone like Sunny Brown, that I really actually enjoy about the media coverage about him, is that like a lot of the soccer players that are coming through the system now that are born and raised in Japan, the coverage is matter of fact. They don't treat them like a foreign person, or a person with even the foreign name. There's no particular strange attention drawn to it. These people, I think, at least in media coverage, are accepted as fully Japanese, and I like the way that the media coverage treating them matter-of-factly as completely Japanese. influences the way that I think the public looks at these people. And when they look at Sonny Brown, when they listen to Sonny Brown in an interview, and they see the coverage, they're recognizing this is a person this is a Japanese citizen with Japanese parent who's come through the Japanese system and has broken a Japan record. And obviously it's easier to embrace, a winner. But I think this is an interesting case to contrast with Naomi Osaka, that of course he has an appearance which also is perhaps distinct. But at the same time, I think I tweeted, apart from being just a fantastic achievement for any human running a sub 10-second 100 meters, let alone as a Japanese person beating the Japan record for 100 meters and breaking the record for the first time for a Japanese person, as the father of a half kid, albeit not a white half kid, different multicultural background, but sharing that Japanese and overseas sort of heritage. And having a foreign name, as my son does, I think it's fantastic to see a kid like Sonny Brown here flying the flag for half kids, so yay, half kids. And again, this is something which I hope will remove the fear and stigma a little bit of the idea of having more foreign residents in Japan, integrating into Japanese society. I mean, it's good to see positive role models. And I think Abdul Hakim has done here is awesome. So congratulations, and that is some great news. And this is what I was talking about here, about governors are calling for more foreign labor in more sectors. And it's kind of funny. So here they are, they're panicking about their towns, and there are so many companies now that are citing inability to find people to work in their factories as the reason for going out of business for so many different companies. And they're begging the central government to allow the new visa system that allows foreigners to come and work in Japan, to expand that, to allow more companies to use foreign labor. But yet the government, Abe himself has always been pointed when they've asked, why are you promoting, is LDP pro-immigration now? And he always says, no, we're not. And he's created a language which is being used throughout government, which is that they don't want foreign immigration, they just want foreign labor. And, if that's the case, move all the factories overseas. But, it's an irresponsible approach to bring in people without thinking that you have to take the responsibility for looking after them as residents. Case in point, the disaster with the Brazilians that happened in so many cases where, for a start, them being exempt from mandatory education and schools in many of the towns in Aichi and Gunma where these Brazilian communities set up. The Japanese towns admittedly they were completely unprepared. But there was no infrastructure for looking after those, and we ended up, down the road, 10 years after that scheme of allowing Japanese and ancestral visas for people second or third generation South Americans to come and live in these towns and work, that their kids who hadn't been in school started to get, associated with crime, and various other sort of social problems in these towns, particularly when these factories moved their operations to China, and they started paying these families to move back to Brazil. So Japan's got a pretty poor record to date, and you'd hope that they've learned the lessons of what, of mismanaging foreign labor, yet this is the way that they're describing this. So yes, indeed they are now at least being a little bit more aware about trying to requesting government support for setting up facilities to encourage and to integrate foreigners more, but the fact that they're still being talked about as labor and not as residents is still problematic, I think. Now this is just sort of interesting. So this is moving now into another topic. Mr. Koricep, behave, stop saying that. And Australians say it wrong. You say it like Japanese. We say it correctly. If you go to England, if you go to South Africa, if you go to New Zealand, if you go to Canada, they don't say fish and chips. They say fish and chips. They say it like us, or more like us. I know we say it kind of flat, but New Zealand is right. Everyone should just have two vowels. It makes everything easier. Talk about the reasons that Japan, for example, is struggling to look after all of its elderly people, and yes, that's right. That triggered me. You could have written butter or fish and chips. Believe me, yes, that is what got me. again, you talk about the reasons that Japan is not growing in population, the idea of how mistreated its workers often are, the idea of how poor welfare-oriented care is, the shortage of doctors and caregivers. Well, here's the situation. Apparently doctors have been claiming in Japan for a long time that there is a system where student doctors who are still at medical universities officially are contracted to only work 1 day a week in hospitals, but actually are forced to work grueling hours, just the same as regular hospitals, and they do it for free, with the excuse and justification from the hospitals, well, they're just trainees, so they're not entitled to be paid properly yet. They're just sort of doing this to get the experience. The government's always denied that the system existed, but apparently a government survey this week confirmed that 50 universities have as much as 2,000 doctors currently, student doctors currently working, grueling hours for no money, and feeling like they have to do this in order to be able to get jobs later on as doctors. So there's a doctor shortage. And yet, you've got the Tokyo Medical University that is deliberately sabotaging the scores of women because they don't want women, because they're afraid of women taking maternity leave and not being available in hospitals later on was their excuse. So they're deliberately cutting the numbers of women, and they're passing men who don't deserve to pass to get into these things. And on top of that, they're forcing them to work to death for free while they're students. I mean, and why is the fertility rate dropping? I mean, and what would you do if the fertility rate increased and we needed more doctors? Who would want to be a doctor? So again, you talk about the big structural issues with Japanese employment that are still not being addressed, and these all feed in both to the birth issue and the ongoing employment stuff. I've got some more employment stuff to talk about, but Andrea has just pinged me about any thoughts on the Hong Kong protests today, which I do have. Actually, I've got a quick story on Tiananmen at the end of this, and I will come to that. And please remind me when I get to talking about China at the end of the show. Wow, it is already 11:20. I'm gonna have to speed it up. Remind me when I get to the end of the show, and I will also talk about Hong Kong today. A company this week, Kaneka. What type of company is Kaneka again? I mean, again, a household name in the chemical industry. Apparently, just got back from, he took paternity leave, although he was kind of encouraged not to, and days after he returned, the company basically punished him by sending him away, assigning him to go work in a different city, knowing that he has a newborn child at home with a wife looking after, basically forcing him to quit the company. His mother publicly lambasted the company of basically bullying this guy because he took paternity leave. The company denies it. They say that assigning employees to travel all over Japan is a normal part of working in Japan. But again, why would you have kids in a society that punishes you for having kids? I mean, again, it all kind of feeds into one. I mean, that company is now getting a beating for its reputation over this, but at the same time, it highlights, this is just a case that became public, but this is the sort of thing that's difficult. Butter. Mainland Tasty, I guess, is in New Zealand. That's right. You could definitely send some Mainland Tasty cheese to me anytime. I gave it to some French people once and they weren't. See, I see butter. It's like Sixth Sense. I'm like that kid in Sixth Sense. I see butter when other people don't see butter. Please, I gave some tasty, New Zealand tasty cheddar cheese to my French rugby teammates sometime. French people don't understand cheddar. I guess. Fair enough, they've got a lot of very good cheese over there, but I do, it's comfort food for me, so yes, please, I would definitely love that. This is the indirect consequence of butter, that's right. The Smooth Biz campaign, I think I talked about this before. In fact, that's funny that that's in there. Did I add this? Well, in any case, the government is encouraging us to move smoothly into work, so we'll see how that goes. Another thing, you might recall a few months ago I talked about the case where the government had been, multiple government departments had been deliberately faking their reports on the number of disabled workers that they were employing. Now remember that the Japanese Ministry of Health, Labour, Welfare, in order to foster participation of disabled people in the economy, actually has a legislation where they audit companies, and they have quotas that if you're above a certain size and if you're above a certain status of company, you need to employ X percentage of your employees need to be registered disabled people with disabled notebooks to basically prove that they're disabled people, and you need to be able to accommodate these people. And whether this means having special braille keyboards or having special hearing facilities or workflows to support them, or reduced hours for people who have it from stress or from mental health issues or whatever. But for people who have these things, these companies in Japan, and they can be fined and penalized, private companies can be fined and penalized for not meeting their quotas of hiring and supporting disabled people. It's a great system which does encourage participation in the economy, and it forces companies, it incentivizes companies to accommodate people that they might not otherwise hire because it would seem like a hassle. It turns out the system, you might recall the story there, that the government was itself enforcing on the public sector, was also enforced on the public sector, but as opposed to the private sector. It was on themselves as well, but without penalties. And it turns out something like 50 government agencies and departments were just filing false numbers. They were actually faking their own reports. Now this would have triggered penalties if these were private companies. These were the guys, including the ministry itself that administers the law. The Ministry of Health, Labour, Welfare was faking its own numbers of disabled employees. This was such a huge scandal when this came out. People just couldn't believe, especially the companies that have been punished for this by the regulator that was itself faking its own numbers. It was pretty galling and pretty stupid. So of course these companies went out and went out drastically trying to just hire as many people and disabled people as possible. Great time to be disabled in the job market, because government was falling over itself trying to hire enough people to meet all of their targets. So apparently what was happening was, for example, in a central government ministry, now we have whistleblowers saying that there was one particular department, in fact they say which one it is, it's a central government ministry. They just hired apparently 2,518 people, but they didn't have any actual work. They didn't have any plan for what they were going to have them do. Apparently, even when these people wanted to work, their supervisors weren't sure if they could actually give them work unsupervised, and they didn't have the time to supervise them, so they'd just say every day, just wait a little bit longer. And they told them all just to browse the ministry's homepage, and this was all that they were told to do for weeks and weeks and months. And apparently just out of sheer boredom of being not allowed to do anything other than browse the internet, 131 of these people left, including somebody who went to the press and said, hey, we just sat there looking at the internet every day. Whenever we tried to work, they stopped us. They literally have just hired us to fill their quota, and they're not making us do anything. To which the internet stay-at-home commenters have all said, wow, I would love a job like that. But again, this is a society that doesn't know how to look after people. That's the conclusion. This is just another proof of this, that this is the government that we need to save us from a falling fertility rate. And they're not good at dealing with welfare issues. So yes. It's a great system, the disabled mandatory hiring system. Well, if you get a notebook, Mr. Korichip, if you qualify for a disabled notebook and you can get a visa and live in Japan, you're golden. You can just browse the internet all day and get money. Okay, wow. I'm going to try to get through this fairly quickly. This is the big one that I really wanted to talk about. There's a new campaign called Kutu. And it's been started apparently by a former swimwear model, but it's actually a swimsuit model or whatever, but it's gone all the way apparently up into Parliament. The Ministry of Health has been talking about this. So Kutu, for a start, this is a play on words. It's a pun of the Me Too movement. Now let's remember what the Me Too movement is. The Me Too movement, I believe, was started initially by a tweet by Alyssa Milano, who was basically coming out about having suffered rape and sexual violation by people, they were in positions of power over her when she was a young actress, and was wanting to take the opportunity by coming out herself to try to make it easier and show solidarity with other women that, for all sorts of understandable reasons, find it very difficult to come forward and share with others that they've been a victim of this. And it makes people, because nobody comes forward, or because it's so hard to come forward and report rape and to report sexual violation, a lot of people who suffer this, particularly at the hands of people that they know or people that they have some sort of power over them, it becomes it becomes increasingly difficult for, they feel isolated and they feel unable to, a lot of people talk about how they're reporting rapes they're reporting rates for sexual abuse cases and so on can be quite low because of the shame and the isolation felt by the victim. So Alyssa Milano, to her credit, decided to take the opportunity on her own case when she was coming forward to not just come forward and tell her own story, but to encourage others as well to feel safe to come forward. And that's, of course, what my understanding of what the Me Too movement is about. It's a movement where it was encouraging people to come forward and share their stories to create a kind of a safe atmosphere for other people to come forward. And it revealed, what came forth was this amazing movement that spread across different countries, which really showed far more people, experience this kind of thing and don't report it than people think. A lot of people coming forward with the different stories. The Harvey Weinstein case, of course, was one of the consequences of this, but lots of cases like it. And people were talking about, well, how's this going to come to Japan? And I remember it came to Japan in a very confused way. For a start, again, for all of the reasons that we've already talked about on the show, certainly the power that men have in workplaces over women, and general issues with regards to attitudes about sex and so on, and underreporting of these sorts of issues. No question, it's at least as much of an issue in Japan as it is in Western countries like America and New Zealand. And that's not to say it certainly is an issue in New Zealand and America and Britain and other countries as well. Certainly, I think there's a sense that there's probably, if anything, at least the same and maybe even more of a problem in Japan, plus the extra complication that although, this was a brave campaign, even in those, it's not easy in any country, even supposedly self-enlightened countries, to come forward with something like this, that, coming forward that you've been sexually violated or raped. And it was kind of a groundbreaker. It was a significant movement, I think, that that this thing got momentum in the countries that it did. When it came to Japan, it was a bit confused. You had a lot of opposition politicians who wanted to make a big deal that they were pro-feminism and pro-women's rights, and that they wanted to encourage, and it was seen, I think it was interpreted as more of a women's rights movement than a I've been raped movement. And it was brought into Japan, but in a way that was sort of easier to digest. And I do remember there was an awkward press conference, in Parliament, where there were like a mix of male and female opposition politicians, many of them like elderly men for the most part, holding up signs saying "Me Too." I remember seeing some of the signs of the 80-year-old Japanese male politicians holding up a "Me Too" sign, and I was thinking, really? I mean, I get it. You're doing it in solidarity, and that's a good thing. And again, trying to create the safe environment and the sort of thing. And this is a really significant, big issue. And I think it's a significant movement. However, it really, let's be honest, it didn't gather ground. It didn't gather momentum in Japan. And certainly when it comes to issues about equality and women's rights in Japan, across all areas. And not just in Japan. I'm not calling Japan out as being unique or different per se to other countries as well in terms of across the board. All countries struggle with equality still. There are indices saying which countries are doing better by different sorts of measures. The Scandinavian countries seem to do quite well, but even then, that's something that they've had to work at and still work at. But certainly Japan generally struggles with these kinds of issues just because, it is a society where when you have a photograph of business leaders or political leaders or whatever, there are no women. So, even if you can intellectually listen to, even if you get the opportunity to hear issues about equality issues, and even if you can intellectually understand it, you don't have people in power who internally understand these issues or feel like it's a high priority, or necessarily feel like it's a high priority. Abe, to his credit, has actually paid at least some lip service to the idea of rectifying imbalances, if only for the practical purpose that the Japanese economy needs more workers and they need to figure out ways to make women feel willing to come and work. So even if it's from enlightened self-interest, there are small things that are improving. But I think jumping straight from no women in power in business or politics pretty much anywhere in Japan, apart from some very isolated exceptions, some who are prominent but still isolated. Jumping straight to I've Been Raped Too, which is a movement that should come to Japan at some point properly. It didn't really catch on, and I think we've gone back into focusing on other issues. So it's kind of funny that the issue which took off in Japan was not the Me Too movement itself. It's this kawaii pun of Me Too talking about kutu, and what this is talking about is specifically high heel dress codes. It's the idea that wearing dress codes normally devised or approved by men that force women to wear high heels, which I understand can be, they risk increased risk of injury. They can hurt your back, they can ruin your feet. They're painful, they're difficult to balance. I mean, The idea that men are making this mandatory for women is in itself a form of kind of oppression towards women that men unthinkingly impose. And there's a suggestion that there are places which apparently have mandatory dress codes requiring women to wear high heels. And this is clearly, well, they should be allowed to wear more comfortable shoes where men can wear more comfortable shoes under the same dress codes. And baby steps. Start where it's easier, no question. I read an article in The Economist recently, which is talking about how in America, a lot of people talk about the difference between air conditioners how Japan is always, the offices are quite hot. In America and Australia, whatever, the offices are always, the aircon is on really, really high and they're cold. I've always been there. I've been in an office where I've literally been like this, like it's been too hot, and the woman sitting next to me has had a blanket and shivering physically, sitting 1 meter away from me. So I know that different people feel temperature differently, and there was an Economist article that was talking about how air conditioner policy in a lot of companies could be seen as sexist against women, in the sense that apparently they have empirical data saying that women on average feel the cold more, based partly, I guess, on their biology. Certainly, I know I go to Australia and I see people in, over air-conditioned rooms, wearing singlets and armless dresses and so on. And so the women there seem to be pretty tough, or maybe they're just used to it. But certainly, there's this idea that office temperatures that are dictated more by what's comfortable for men than women, for example, is something which can impede negatively on women's productivity. The whole thing about toilets, the fact that men don't need to spend as much time in toilets, so we can go in and out. We don't have to wait in lines as long for toilets. So in order to have equal access to toilets, you really need to have more women's toilets than men's toilets, or unisex toilets, for example. The deal of having separate toilets in equal numbers just works out well for men, without men realizing that it's disadvantageous towards women. There's inequalities all over the place, and I think it's always good to address them wherever they can be found. I do have a problem, however, with the idea of using one of these other causes for equality. They're all in the great cause of redressing power imbalance, but I do think there is a difference between high-heeled shoes or air conditioning and being raped. All to do with empowerment and giving women a voice and being heard and all of that. The reason I think Kutu has made it into Parliament, and it's funny, and it got into Parliament, and what did the Minister of Health say? You think he'd say the easiest thing, this is terrible, women should be able to wear whatever shoes they like. No, he said women should have to wear shoes. I think it's nice. That's what he said. So this is how far away from we are in Japan from having a real Me Too movement. He's being condemned for saying he agrees with forcing women to wear high-heeled shoes. This is the level of debate. This is the entire level of debate that Japan can handle right now, which is, I suppose, disappointing in some ways. But there it is. There's the Kutu, and it's a pun. It's also based, by the way. Kutsu means shoes, but Kutsu also means to experience pain. If you add an extra u on the end. And it's a pun with Kutu, so it's a very clever slogan, even if it's not quite really about the same thing. And I don't know, I do feel like they're playing off, it's still serious, both topics are serious, but again, I'm not sure that that's really appropriate, that you should be equating those, and I think Japan separately should be, well, maybe if this is a baby step towards getting to a real Me Too movement in Japan, then why not? But all of that said, I haven't worked in a place which I know to have a mandatory high heels policy. I've never actually experienced that. I was surprised to hear that this is a thing. But I'm a man, so there you go. But certainly, it's ridiculous, right? Sometimes you get tall women who don't want to have high heels, that wear flat shoes on purpose. So I don't know. There is, by the way, this whole thing did remind me of back when I was in law school in the 1990s. I didn't really like it very much, but there was a TV series on called Ally McBeal. I guess you're showing your age if you know about it. It wasn't that great, but the first couple of seasons were quite good, and I quite liked some of the characters in it. The character I really liked was, I think his name was Richard Fish. He was like a hit partner at the firm where the main character, where Ally McBeal worked. And he was basically always extremely inappropriate and politically incorrect, but was very good at creating twisted arguments to show the righteousness of his position. Now, I remember there was a great episode where he was doing a case arguing that women as a class are disabled. And the assistant that was helping him with the case, Georgia, who I don't think was a lawyer, she was assisting him, and she was getting more and more offended by him making arguments about how helpless and disabled women are in general. And Sort of when she gets to a peak of anger, he says, "Give me your shoe," which he didn't want to do, which he did, and he held it up, and he said, look, why would a woman wear this if they weren't inherently in a position of disadvantage? I mean, there's nothing good about this. It's painful, it deforms your feet, it ruins your back, it increases your chance of injury and risk, and you do it to please men. How can you interpret that as anything other than being disabled? Again, it's a rhetorical. It was used for humor, but I love the argument. This whole thing about Kutu reminded me of that episode of Ally McBeal. So anyway, there we go. Japanese women want a law against mandatory heels at work. Which, how could you not agree with that? I mean, unless men want to actually try to wear them, but it surprises me that mandatory heels exist. I mean, I suppose if you're like a cabaret hostess or I don't know, but it is weird, and I agree with it. But it's funny, the Minister of Health actually came out arguing against it, so what can you do? If you're coming to Japan, you're working in AI or new fields of high-tech skills, Sony is boosting its starting pay for those employees by 20%, which must be annoying all the older men who get that pay as well and feel like younger people aren't entitled to it. But again, baby steps to improving the economy. Chocolate season, that Pocky chocolate, that's some good stuff. Oh man, that was so bad. I've been trying to diet and I just can't because they keep releasing new chocolate, and it's good. It's good. This is the best time of year, even if it's raining. It may be raining outside, but there's chocolate inside, and I'm putting on weight. It's good. What can we say? A follow-on from the story about the bureaucrat that murdered his live-in son. It turned out the son had only been living at home for a week. He'd been away for a long time. Yet the father murdered him in anticipation that he might become a hikikomori and murder people like that other case in Kawasaki, which sounds weak. And to me, I was tweeting this week that I was getting increasingly disturbed by the media coverage, because what often happens in Japan is that when someone powerful gets in trouble with the law, particularly in a case like this where it's not like an ambush, where it's not like a takedown, where it's something that he sort of spontaneously did, the network of people that support that people, and this person was a powerful government bureaucrat, moved to try to get that person, both through the media and the police and the justice system, treated in the most favorable light possible. And there's two cases that have happened recently. One, there was an 80-something-year-old driver in Ikebukuro who, it seems, just pressed the wrong pedal and ran through a footpath, ran over like 20 people, killed a woman and her daughter. And in every other case where this has been happening with elderly people, having accidents from mishandling cars and running people over, they're always arrested on the scene. This ex-powerful government bureaucrat was allowed to go home, and even now he's not cooperating with voluntary questioning. He's maintaining that the car just accelerated by itself, and at the same time he didn't show up to voluntary questioning because he said he had a leg injury, which is probably what caused the accident. Same case here. You another powerful ex-government bureaucrat. He's in jail, but at the same time, all of the media coverage is not focusing on the fact that this person stabbed his son to death. It seems in a fit of rage. It's really focusing on demonizing the son as being this a parasite single, if not a hikikomori. All the coverage is saying, including from the police, and it's being fed to the media, and the media also very sympathetically covering that in light of the Kawasaki massacre by the hikikomori of those kids, that this father felt a responsibility from having raised a spoiled child, 44 years old, who was coming back home, who wasn't working or looking for work, who played Dragon Quest every day, using his parents' money, that he came home and they're basically sort of demonizing him. And it's all added up to the point where, well, of all the information that's damning against the sort of the character assassination of the victim of this murder case where this dad murdered his son, first they were painting him as a hikikomori just like that other case, and saying that he was getting irritated by a school sports day and was threatening to go kill the kids like in Kawasaki, and the father felt like he had to kill him. But again, he wasn't a hikikomori, he'd only been home for a week. But the father did say that the son had been violent in the past, which sounded like a self-serving excuse, but this person apparently left a Twitter account with, he talked about a lot of things which basically make him look like a very unpleasant person. Being an unpleasant person, even doing bad things in the past, is not necessarily ever a justification to actually be executed, which is still what the media is pushing towards. But he did put these tweets here in particular, and talking about specifically how he's long sort of basically hated his mother. His mother would clean up his plastic, break his plastic models and stuff like that. And he talks about, there's a thing down the bottom, That's why back in my second year of junior high school, the first time I ever punched my mother to the ground, the feeling of release I got, I can't forget. So he's talking with nostalgia about the first time he beat his mother to the ground. He's a pretty horrible person, and the guy says that this guy was violent towards the parents. But even so, it all adds up. The news coverage, including over here, that actually there's some cases now where the media is misidentifying the victim of the case, saying that he's the suspect. I mean, Freudian slip, but that's how twisted the coverage of this is being, in terms of being sympathetic to the father that freaked out and murdered his son by stabbing him to death. And the son, who, by all accounts, seems like he's a pretty unpleasant guy, but, is actually being characterized consistently in all the media coverage as being more the guilty party in this. So it's typical, and I find it disturbing, and that's what I've raised in Twitter during the week. Another thing about don't mess with the police, a 21-year-old who was basically struggling during an arrest was held down by like 10 police officers. Japanese do this. They don't beat you, they don't get a baton, they won't tase you, they won't shoot you, but they will suppress you. Then and this is they do this kind of these techniques of kind of de-escalation, but they can involve suppressing people. This person was held down, and like we've seen in some cases in the US, he died later on. He was freaking out a bit at the time, but again, do not mess with the police. Do not resist. It's like the lamp boy, basically. When he resisted arrest, 12 months later, last I heard, he's still in jail. And it wasn't for breaking a lamp. It was for messing with the police. Black Mirror. God damn it, it's an hour. I'm going to do some music anyway. I'm going to get through this. Black Mirror. This guy, every time he watches an episode of Black Mirror, he wants to destroy technology to avoid the future. 3 new episodes up. Go watch them. I won't do spoilers. I love Black Mirror. I think the new 3 episodes are good. Looking back, of the 3, there's one about video games striking vipers. That caught me a little bit off guard, I must admit. I mean, what's wrong with the programmers of a game like that? But exactly right. That's what Alexa says as well. I should be careful, I just said the name. The first episode was great. Indeed, the problems of virtual gaming. That's not one that I'd ever really considered. It was a little bit Brokeback. Well, I know I won't even go into that. Watch it. You should watch it. It's a little, it throws you off, but that's what Black Mirror does. The second one is with regards to the it's present day actually, and is a little bit over dramatic, but I thought was actually pertinent and was quite well done. The second one. The third one was okay-ish. Frankly, it was recycling old technology ideas. And it felt. I saw someone give it a review that they thought that it felt like a teen, sort of movie special, which it kind of was, and it was starring Hannah Montana, Miley Cyrus, and it was alright. It was alright, but it wasn't up to the par of the other ones. But certainly the first 2 episodes of the new season, go watch them. I'm waiting for Peter to complain about the polar bear elements of the first one, but that was good. It does what it does. It catches you off guard and it leaves you thinking about it. So they were pretty good. Lots to talk about. Some rumors that the Olympics would not let people share photographs on social media. Apparently you won't be able to share video on social media, but they've clarified that will be able to take photos, so yay for that. If you're going to America, they're going to be looking at your social media. I guess they're going to have to watch every one of these shows. Good luck. I hope they subscribe. TSA, yes. Welcome to the show. When the real-life Mario Kart company got taken to court for using the Mario Kart brand name, they were sued by Nintendo. They changed their name to definitely anything but Mario Kart, or what is it? Not associated with Nintendo whatsoever. Nintendo took them to court and won again for breaching their trademark, for using the name. We have nothing to do with Nintendo. Was their name? They lost again. So clearly they're getting to the limits of pushing this. So the carts are still there, but the names are probably still going to have to change. And freaky stuff. Apparently now, just from your voice, there's AIs that can be trained to pretty accurately predict your face. I don't know how they do this. I don't know if they associate it based on your accent with what ethnicity or nation you might be, and with the kind of sound parameters of what kind of face you might have. I don't know how they do it, but apparently, they've gotten pretty freaky matches, or maybe they just match your voice to something that's in their massive database on the internet. But there are algorithms now which can actually create portraits of people just based on the sound of their voices. And the final story, China. Andrew and Mulberry talked about this earlier. about the Hong Kong crackdown, which is a different issue. But we have China on the 30th anniversary of the Tiananmen Square massacre. I mean, for a country that spends a lot of time lecturing other countries about the importance of history, they're making a pretty concerted effort to erase their own history with regards to this massacre of unarmed, peaceful civilians protesting for greater government accountability in 1989. I remember when it happened, it was, it was nuts. The crackdown is still continuing to this day. Everything associated with it, even trains that are associated with the date, like 8967, I think was 89 June 7 or whatever the date of it was. Trains with that code were stopped running for that day. I mean, and when it was raised in an international forum, the defense minister of China publicly said this was a civil disturbance and we had to use all means necessary to, preserve public order, and it was justified. Of course, still never admitting that it was a massacre, still never actually admitting the number of people who was murdered in this. If this happened, if the Japanese had done this to Chinese people, this would be another, landmark day. The Marco Polo Bridge, incident, the massacres that are marked all throughout throughout the Chinese calendar year for resentment towards Japan. Yet when the Chinese Communist Party does it towards their own people, understandably, of course, they want to protect themselves. But yes, again, just looking terrible, and a reminder of what the regime there is, and frankly what the leaders in charge of that regime would really be accountable for if the reason that they can't become democratic, because they've got blood on their hands. They can't. They'll be in jail, frankly, for this. If they were to become if they had proper rule of law. Which brings us to the point that Andrea raised earlier this week, which is earlier in the show, about the laws changing in Hong Kong to allow extradition to China. Very cleverly brought in, actually. They argued it was necessary because of they needed an extradition treaty to send a murderer captured in Hong Kong to the Republic of China, which is, of course, not Beijing, it's Taiwan. But they argued, given that they recognize all of China being all of China, and they needed a law to permit people to send people from Hong Kong to China, the purpose of it being Chinese Taipei in this case, they looked like passing this law, which would have allowed authorities in Hong Kong to send people for crimes, arguably even political crimes or any sort of crimes, over to mainland China, where of course they do not have the same civil and legal protections that you have in China. And even the current situation where there still is not an extradition treaty between Hong Kong and mainland China, even though technically Hong Kong is part of mainland China, so you could argue that mainland China is being very generous, allowing Hong Kong to have this kind of privileged status. But certainly there are cases, including those bookshop owners, where they've just gone and grabbed people and kidnapped people and tricked people into getting them into China and putting them into re-education camps, even from Hong Kong. It's already happened. But I suppose it's more limited right now, and of course it could get worse. What can I say? I mean, in the end of the day, I feel for the rights of the people in Hong Kong. I obviously support them, and frankly, them and everybody like them in mainland China that wants to have just ordinary civil rights like Chinese enjoy in Singapore and Chinese Taipei and Hong Kong. The idea that democracy and civil rights are incompatible with Chinese values is wrong. I mean, it's demonstrably wrong. Singapore is a little bit debatable, and of course Singapore is multicultural, but I mean, so is China. But it is dominated by as Chinese ethnic minority. I mean, frankly, no matter how much they pretend that they're not. So you take, there are demonstrable examples of stable, modern democracies that respect human rights. Again, Singapore, maybe a little bit arguable, but at least by standards of rule of law, China doesn't have an excuse. And Taiwan is the best example of this, and I really think it's always a great shame that the world has to pretend, it's like the emperor's new clothes, they have to pretend that Taiwan doesn't exist to appease China, which is ridiculous. Taiwan's a country of 25 million people, they have their own currency, their own military, their own defined territory, they've got no, and they're a great country, they're as big as like North Korea in terms of population, and we have to pretend that they don't exist. So for all of this sort of stuff anyway, yes, it's a shame, but there again, by rights, I mean, the reason Hong Kong has a privileged position that it has is because of the Opium Wars, a completely unethical, unjustified history of England of all countries, a small island country on the opposite side of the world, humiliating China in a war that they fought in order for the right to be able to keep Chinese addicted to heroin. The legacy of that was Hong Kong's separation and now special status. But look, from a greater perspective, I could understand Chinese feeling like, well, why does Hong Kong get any privileges at all? But that said, obviously China's got a lot of issues, and Hong Kong should be there as a source of inspiration for China to become better, not for China to drag Hong Kong down into the problems that it has. But what can you do? That is China, and I'm not an expert on China. I do recommend that everybody here, if you're interested in China, including you, Andrea Moboy, subscribe to Serpent ZA. It's all as one word, Serpent. It's SERPENTZA. He is a South African person who lives in China. He makes awesome video blogs. He talks about China quite openly while living there. He has to deal with the Chinese right-wing trolls quite a lot, but he makes excellent videos. He does excellent commentary. I've really enjoyed watching his videos lately, and he's a far better informed person than I to talk about Chinese stuff. But yes, I look on from afar with concern and hope for the people of Hong Kong that they can preserve their civil rights that they have. But we'll see. Mari Lagos, good to see you. I'm sorry I didn't catch you earlier, but buenos noches, I guess, if you are earlier in the day. But good to see. Mr. Cordyceps, wasn't he booted out of China? Not last that I heard. Maybe he was, but no, he wasn't booted out of China. He's still married to a Chinese doctor wife. He's been traveling. He's been doing motorcycle trips in Vietnam and Mexico, but he's been posting videos of those. But last I heard, he hasn't been kicked out anyway. Although people have been trying to do it. So anyway, that's the show, and it is an hour and 10 minutes. So I don't know. Do some music. Oh, so it's Buenos Dias, I guess. Hooray for rural Japan. Oh, okay. Mari Lagos, you're in Japan. Well, welcome there. Would you like some music? Or, it's been an hour 10, so I guess I might just call it a show for tonight. But play the Funky Akai. That's a good idea. Except, how do I connect it? I can connect it through the headphones. I could do that. Okay, let's do a little bit of music. I haven't done music for a while. I'm missing it. So let's have a go at this. Okay. Powered USB. Keyboard. Let's jam it up. Let's see what we can do here. Boom. That there. Power. Also, it is hot. I'm going to turn the phone. Alrighty. Oh, also a good opportunity to here to show the new headphones. I put new earpads on this week, so that's pretty cool. Okay, so let's get the sound plugged in. So let's turn on GarageBand. Here, this in here. Okay, so if I go into Korg, this should there we go. This is a track that I was making for somebody who wanted Caribbean steel drums, and I was playing around with it. It's still not really in great shape, but here's what I have. That's terrible. Okay, Still working on that one. Let's go and pick out. In fact, let's do done here. And let's just do a new track. So let's pick out some drums. In fact, you know what? Maybe. Oh, that would be awesome if I could do that. Hang on a second. I might be able to get this up on the screen. I've got to change my Wi-Fi. Boom. And if I do that, then I can screen mirror. Booyah. Okay, that's a little bit weird because it's in the middle there, but well, you get an idea anyway. Let's turn this on. So let's add a track. Let's start with some drums, do something basic. Oh. Why is it not allowing me to do that? Okay, let's take a new track. Add new section. That's funny. GarageBand is acting up. Could it be because of this? Let me take this out. Let me unplug the keyboard for a moment. Okay. Let's try rebooting that. It could be because of AirPlay. Okay. Alrighty, that's what we want. Let's plug this in. And let's take this, put the sound in again. Okay. You can hear that, right? Okay. So let's start with a beat. Okay, now we can start. Let's do this. The screen is not being very responsive here. This is frozen up. What's up here, GarageBand? Come on. I think because of the AirPlay, it's struggling to do that. So I'm going to stop mirroring, just see if this improves it. I think that might be the problem. That's weird. Okay, if I disconnect the keyboard and I force quit GarageBand, let's try this one more time. Okay, I think I can get something basic done here, so let's just make a random beat. Just for an idea. But I really want to use the keyboard. Okay, so done. That's like a random beat. So that's that, and then let's go and make a keyboard. Okay, let's do that. I'm gonna get back up here. Boom, classic house. Okay, so that is the beat. Let's pull that over. Oh, crap. Let's go over here. One, two, three, loop. Okay, now let's go and put some music on it. So I'm going to try this again with the keyboard. We'll see if we can do any better. Boom. And in fact, let's do something cool. Let's use some strings. Let's make something orchestral. Now that was kind of crap, but let's just see what we can get out of that. Okay, let's just take a section of that and see what it sounds like. Boom, and loop it. So okay, let's offset that a little bit. I'll tell you what, I'll get the setup in another week so that I can show you me making stuff on GarageBand like on the screen. I'll play around with this a little bit tonight, but oh, you can't hear it, really? Okay. Well, apart from the fact it sounds bad. Let me trim. Let's do that. And that, let's do this. Okay, let's add another one. You can hear that? Let's turn up the headphones a bit. Strings. You know what? I think it's not a good shape tonight, so I'm going to separately set up a music thing. In fact, maybe I should just do a separate music show. But in any case, check out the new earpads. I'll trim the end of this video. Look out for Japan Business Time Reiwa Edition. It's going to be starting soon, so I'm going to be putting that up every day. The videos are now approved. I'm just going to queue them up and get them out. So look out for that as a daily thing. And yes, I will come back and probably show you me using this and this together in more coordination in with some more preparation. Maybe I'll do it separately to the news show sometime. So yes, have a good week, everybody, and I'll be back. I just took them off. It's hot, and it was uncomfortable with the headphones over the top of them. I'll see you all. Have a good week, everybody. See you next week, and peace. Remember to like if you liked. Too much to do in a 1 hour show. Boom. See ya.